Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the presentation for today. And we want to thank everybody for joining us. This is Paul Riefenberg at CDP in Charlotte. I kind of head up the Carolinas office, and Brett Kligerman with CDP is also on the line with us. He heads up the Mid-Atlantic office for CDP. And we're very delighted today to have our clients from City of Durham with us. This is part two to a presentation we did last month, and it's a follow-up on continuing to improve how they use project management at the City of Durham and integrate systems together. So showing how Primavera can be integrated with other systems that you use corporately as clients to create best practices for your organization. So with us today is Michael Hughes. He's the Assistant Engineering Manager for the Public Works Division of City of Durham, and he's kind of the visionary behind how the tool is being used there for the organization. Also with him is Scott Peruski, who's an engineer on the staff with Mike, and Scott is kind of a jack of all trades with Primavera and other applications, and he helps Mike administer the system. And then David Cates, who is a contributor to this presentation, is the GIS manager and kind of IT support for Public Works. He's unable to join us today, but had a great contribution in the vision and in the execution of how the city is integrating GIS with Primavera. So I will turn it over at this point to Michael Hughes, and just for some maintenance things, we have a question button. If you have questions, you can type your questions into the question button. Everybody is on mute, so we're going to hold questions, generally speaking, to the end of the presentation. If we see any really exciting questions that we feel like deserve interrupting the presenters, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll have a question and answer series at the end of the presentation and make sure that we get to all your questions. And if you have any needs for support, you can use the questions or the chat to get with Brett and I, who can help you offline with any technical issues. So now, with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Can everybody hear me okay? Paul, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Oh, great. Okay, just doing a sound check, testing 1, 2, 3. Hey, this is Mike Hughes. As Paul said, I'm the Assistant Engineering Manager for the City of Durham, and joining me is Scott Peruski.
Hey, everybody. This is Scott. I've been with the city for about 2 years, and as Paul said, I work with the design group, and I sort of help out wherever I can, and in this case with Primavera.
Hey, thanks, Scott. So this is, as Paul said, this is part two of the two-part last month, and I think what the abstract indicated that part two we were going to show off more of the dashboard and our GIS integration. Well, as things worked out, I think most of the focus today is going to be on the GIS integration. The dashboard, we gave an introduction to it last time, and if there's more specific questions about it, we can bring it up at the end of the presentation. But for the most part, we'll be talking about GIS. Moving into our second slide for today, this came from our part one of our presentation, and we early on in our needs analysis knew that we wanted the GIS infrastructure management system to be connected in some way to the Primavera project management system, but we weren't quite sure as we were doing brainstorming as to how that connection would happen. And Paul brought in a consultant called Wendell Ducher, and I believe they're a civil engineering firm from upstate New York, and they had a very robust connection between GIS and Primavera. And we received a proposal from Wendell Ducher and nearly implemented it, but what happened is we realized that the scope of our comprehensive deployment plan was very, very large, and our goals were very broad and big at the outset, and we made a decision, a business decision, to compartmentalize and simplify our deployment and take some baby steps. So as a result, GIS integration came second, and our initial focus was deployment on a large street construction contract. It was actually ended up being a $7 million contract called ST-227, and we learned, as we talked about in part 1, that that was a type 1 contract. So we got that under our belt, and then we started doing some other things, and we've integrated it with GIS, as you'll see in the subsequent slides. We do that integration through an entity we call facility IDs, and the facility ID is a unique serial number for infrastructure within an ArcGIS feature class. And I'm not a GIS guy, that's David's job, but I liken feature classes in ArcGIS to be like layers in AutoCAD. And you can turn them on and turn them off. And within the feature classes that we have built for use with Primavera, which is shown in the next bullet, we've built 4 types: curb ramps, sidewalk point repairs, and sidewalk linear repairs, and street resurfacing. Within each of those feature classes is a data object called a facility ID that's a unique serial number within each of those classes. So what I thought we would do would be give an example of how we're using those facility IDs from our SW21 curb ramp project. And if you remember from part 1, we described how we publish contract documents on the web. And I thought we would start off by just taking a refresher and having a look at that. So I'm going to go to the Durham website, and if you go to inside City Hall, City Departments, and go to the Department of Public Works just at the root, over here on the left-hand side, we have in this list of links, we have construction projects active and completed. And just also note, down in the lower right-hand corner, we have a link to projects under construction. So I will pick that, and we can see the construction projects that are currently planned or under construction. And they're organized by stimulus, general projects, and resurfacing and sidewalk. So I'm going to go to SW21. And in here, we published our contract as a PDF. And rather than open it up from the website, I've already got it open, and I will just pop it open like that, as if it came from the website. But you all could pull it down from the website if you choose. So in our contract, looking at the table of contents briefly, I'm going to just move down here to the appendices. We've got this thing called Appendix E curb ramp locations that begins on page 186. I'm going to move directly to there by typing 186 up here and hit enter. And yeah, I need to go down 2 pages. So this is the beginning of the curb ramp locations. And I'm going to focus on just one of these locations. I'm going to move ahead, and I'm going to show you, and we'll track through the system, this facility ID for Anderson and Prince. And the facility ID is 14136, and remember that's a unique serial number in the GIS system. And what this table is telling me, that's showing up on PDF tile map number 81104. So we also handed out the contractors a CD with his PDF maps on it. It was too big to distribute through the web, and I've got this particular one open, so I thought I would just show you what it looks like. This output comes directly out of GIS, and you can see the grid, the map tile grid of the city in the upper right-hand corner, and down below that, the scale, of course, north is up. I don't see the north arrow, but I guess that's implicit. And then we have a list of the curb ramps that are contained in SW21. And we've got different classes of ramp, 1 which is a single, 2 is a double, and so on. Now I happen to know, because of, I know the city pretty well, that that facility ID, 14136 I think, is up in this area. So I'm going to use the zoom tool and zoom in. And sure enough, there is 14136. And so that's how we link at the outset of a project GIS to the contract, and then the contract provide a pointer to the contractor on where to find the work. Scott, what are we going to go to next? We're going to go to the master spreadsheet of ramps. So in this particular contract, SW21, there is about 600 locations in the city where we are building curb ramps. And the facility IDs for all those 600, or at least half of them, I think, are in this column B of this spreadsheet. And I believe down here on row 43 is our 14136 facility ID for Anderson and Prince. This spreadsheet is intended to summarize the completed construction. Well, it does a couple things for us, but we use it during construction to keep track of what's built, and that comes to us through Contract Manager. We'll explore that link in a second. But at the end, it gives us the cost, the total cost of putting a ramp in that location. So what we have is now a cost that we can associate geospatially by moving this data back to GIS, and that's what indeed we did. So this is a link, and if I drill on this link, it takes me to this particular sheet within the spreadsheet, sheet number 170, thanks Scott, for the facility ID, and it tells me that this work was performed in January of 2009. These are the items from the unit price contract that are in the schedule of values for the contract, and I think, Scott, if I'm right, this ended up being about an $800,000 contract.
Hey, Mike?
Yes.
Your voice went to about a third of the volume it was a minute ago.
Really? How about right now?
That's better.
Is it? I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me that. Do I need to back up and repeat anything? Do I need to back up?
Maybe a couple of sentences, and you're still a little soft. I don't know if something happened with the mic or...
Well, thank you. Just
that's better.
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to back up then, Paul, and just come back to the beginning of that discussion with the master list of IDs. So this is the facility that we're going to track, the facility ID on this contract. I believe the contract ended up being about an $800,000 contract. There was 600 locations where we're putting these ramps in. The spreadsheet helped us track what was being worked on, and it also helped us track on the back end the costs associated with each facility ID. So in this case, this ramp cost us $2,138, and what we've done is we've pushed that data back to GIS so we can geospatially accumulate where we spent our money. If I want to see the details of the work that was performed, I click on this link and I come to sheet number 170 in the spreadsheet, and it's telling me that the work was performed in on January 8th, 9th, and 12th of 2009. The rows in this spreadsheet are the pay items out of the schedule of values for the contract, and I think there was about 30-some pay items, 33 pay items in the contract. And it tells me that on the 8th we paid for a mobilization, and on the 12th we paid for 30 square feet of truncated domes, and so on. So I thought now what we would do would be, well, for a second, I'm going to pop back to the beginning and show you some other statistics that come out of this spreadsheet. We keep track of the ramps that we installed by quarter. So we know that in the second quarter of, and these are fiscal quarters, the second fiscal quarter of 2008, we built 39 ramps and spent $85,000 of the contract, and the average cost was that. And we have another tab that gives us the statistics, how many parallel ramps we built, how many single ramps, and what the costs are for each of those. But I'm going to minimize this for a second and minimize the PDF and minimize the contract docs. And I'm going to go to Primavera, to Contract Manager, just to pull up the daily reports for January of 2009. Paul, how's my volume?
Doing good right now.
Oh, good. All right. So I'm going to go to the logs, daily reports, and this contract is still in progress. The last work was done on November 30th of 2009, and the contractor is actually getting started next week and picking up the last of the ramps. But I think that January was somewhere around page 7 right here, and indeed it is. And if I go to the daily report on January 12th, we should be able to see the summary of the work that was done that day. This is what we have called a Type 3 contract, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. But in aggregate, on that day, the contractor put in 104 square feet of truncated dome ramps. He removed 10 square yards of concrete driveway and so on. But the details are down here in the bottom in an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm going to double click that open. I believe I got it. Let me, yeah. I get a note, is it okay to open it up? And I say, sure. So we're pulling this up from the Primavera server as an attachment. And this is what our contractor attached to his daily report for that day. And it shows that he worked on 5 separate facility IDs. And on those facility IDs, he installed truncated domes on all of them. And he had some other pay items for that day for those facility IDs. So what our contractor does then is he keeps track of our granular accounting by facility ID for Type 3 contracts in a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet rolls up the totals, and then he, let me minimize this. Scott's directing me to go back to here, close this, and go back to where I left off. And the contractor attaches the backup detail and then puts his totals in up here. In the approval process, our inspectors pick up the daily reports, and our inspectors then approve them for payment, and at the end of the month they get rolled into the payment requisition automatically. And the other cool thing is that the totals of those payment requisitions then get pushed to the P6 schedules. I think we touched on that last time in part 1. So let me go back. Let me actually log out of here and go back to the PowerPoint and kind of tie maybe a couple of things together. So we took a look at SW21. We tracked a facility ID from the conceptual stage where we published it in a contract, and we did the work and approved it and paid for it. And now let's ask a couple of questions. Oh, the construction contract types that I alluded to. In part 1 of the Tobacco Road seminar, we told you that in our lessons learned department, as we went down the road of deploying Primavera, we figured out internally that we've got 3 types of contracts. The initial contract that it was deployed on was ST227 that had 14 projects in that contract, 128 items in the schedule of values. The contract amount at the outset was about $6.1 million, and the average cost per project was $435,000. ST233 is a resurfacing contract, and we're going to talk a whole lot more about that in a little bit. That's got 200 project locations, 25 pay items in the SOV. It started out as a $4 million contract, and now it's closer to 6 or 8. And the average cost per facility ID or block is $22,000. And SW21, like SW19, SW21 was a curb ramp project. It was a Type 3. It had about 600 projects, 33 items in the SOV, and the average cost is about $2,000 per facility ID. We had seen fleetingly just a minute ago, because I was in Contract Manager, what the project tree looks like, but we've customized the project tree. So we've got our types of projects in a tree within Contract Manager, and you expand the tree to take a look at the street projects and expand the tree to take a look at the water and sewer projects and so on. And the Type 1 projects and contract manager are large. So what we do is we set up a separate committed contract for every project location. So remember, the average cost for those was about $400,000. Well, in the Type 3 contracts, because there are so many of them and the average cost is only, in the case of curb ramps, a couple $1,000s, or in the case of resurfacing, maybe $20,000 per location, we only set up one contract committed, and we do our bookkeeping in an Excel spreadsheet that gets attached to the daily reports. Let me back up. Oh, yeah, no, I'll come forward. And what that kind of led us to do is to think about how could we do the granular accounting that we need to by facility ID and still leverage the strength of Primavera. And that led us to formulate a custom piece of software that we call PDRX. It stands for Primavera Daily Report Extender, PDRX. And that is some code that's being written by one of Paul's associates that he brought to our project. And it is an ancillary daily report system that complements Contract Manager that provides a multi-level, hierarchical, and routable review system that's uniquely defined for each project. It provides read-only audit trail of changes to the daily report. That's another maybe enhancement that we wanted that doesn't come out of the box with Contract Manager. And it has the ability to maintain a subsidiary ledger in a SQL database instead of using Excel spreadsheets of project costs at the really granular level. So that addresses our Type 2 and Type 3 needs really well. And it also provides a feature that's really important to us, which is a look-ahead capability with respect to the need for change orders when installed materials exceed budgeted materials on a contract. We can answer more questions about that later. Let me breeze on here to the next slide and say, well, why are we doing such granular accounting? Well, that granular accounting is our internal basis for estimating bid quantities on unit price contracts. So kind of imagine this. We know that we need 600 curb ramps across the city of Durham, and we have to put a contract that comes up with the estimated number of unit price quantities that we need in our contract. And so we have staff that goes out and does some surveys, and we compile, in that case, a statistical analysis of how many square yards or square feet of truncated domes we need and how many square yards of concrete, how many lineal feet of concrete we need solid. So that's how we develop our bid quantities, and then we want to track our actuals to see how well our estimates were. And that's one reason why we do it. Another reason is internal audit. That gives us great accountability of where and how we spend public money. And I don't know about our audience, but we find that we here in Durham frequently get asked those kinds of questions. It also allows us to answer geospatial questions about where money was spent for the citizens and city council. And a frequently used measure is called our PAC districts, or Police Action Committee districts. The annual Coffee with Council meetings are held by PAC district, and they occur in each PAC district during the first quarter of each calendar year, prior to establishing the city's budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And these meetings provide the public with input to budget items for the new fiscal year, which begins each July. And we're frequently asked to provide the citizens and council with the accounting of prior year construction activities by PAC district at these meetings. So let me show you what our PAC districts look like. This is a PDF that came out of GIS of the whole city. And we have 5 of these districts. District 5 is right in downtown Durham. For those of you that know Durham, this road is I-85, and it comes and goes north. This road is 15501, and this is 147, Highway 147, that leads to I-40, which is down here in the bottom. So the city of Durham is just tucked between I-40 and I-85. PAC District 5 happens to be downtown. PAC District 3 and 4 and so on. And if I zoom in a little bit, I guess I've got the zoom tool active, right around District 5, we can see, and I will point this out because I know this map, I apologize for the graphics, that area that we were looking at where the curb ramp was located is PAC 3, and it's right there at that intersection. So what does our statistics look like that we report to the City Council? And it looks like this. This is our breakout that was used for this year's meeting. It showed the citizens in the stimulus projects where we were spending money by PAC district. And this is the new sidewalk construction portion of the stimulus project where we're spending our resurfacing money. And we've got this smaller project to realign an intersection. This is just in the Department of Public Works, our sidewalk projects. We've got other stimulus monies going other places. Our resurfacing projects were broken up between ST 233 and 234, so you can see there's some big money there. And people are always interested, well, why are you spending so little money in PAC 5 and so much money in PAC 2? Well, there's a lot of good reasons as to why that's the case. And then we combine the results over here in this table. Let me say, let's go back to our PowerPoint and then kind of change gears and show a slightly different way that we're using GIS in our street resurfacing contracts. And this is called the Street Resurfacing Shuffle.
Hey, Mike?
Yeah.
Before you do that, do you just want to kind of summarize in a discussion how the information got, just kind of summarize, you know, from Primavera into the spreadsheet and through GIS to that final report you just showed?
Sure. Thank you for asking. Let me go back to the final report and go to a couple of other tabs that might help amplify that. So this tab is actually from GIS, and from GIS you can export an Excel spreadsheet that has the columns that are the data elements within GIS. So this is the output side of it, Paul. On the input side of it, what we hand off to David Cates are really two columns in an Excel spreadsheet. And the first column is facility ID, and then the second column is actual cost. This is estimated, it's just a misnomer, it's actually actual cost. So if we hand David a spreadsheet or an Access database or some other data organization that has those two columns in it, facility ID and estimated cost, he can then import that to GIS, and that's how the data gets back in. That data comes from something like this master spreadsheet where we've got the list of facility IDs and the final installed cost. Was that sufficient?
Right, which is attached to the daily report in Primavera.
10-4. That's exactly correct. Was that helpful?
Yeah, I just wanted to close the loop on the whole process.
Okay. All right. Well, if we've succeeded with that, then we'll start a different process and talk about the street resurfacing shuffle. So you all have seen that we have had two separate resurfacing contracts active, 233 and 234. And they're currently ongoing contracts, and they were issued in different calendar quarters to two different contractors. Today, I think ST233 is about a $7 million contract, and it is about 55% complete. And ST234 is also a $6 million contract that might be 10% complete. When we launch these contracts, this acronym called Pavement Condition Rating, PCR, the PCRs of streets were the basis of the original allocation of streets to be resurfaced in each of these two contracts. And what we found out just at the end of last fall after we launched 234, that the spatial distribution of streets between the contracts wasn't optimal. And I will show you a slide that really drives that point home in a second. Another unanticipated complication was the need for sanitary sewer videos and point repairs to the sewer lines underneath the streets prior to resurfacing, and that's done by a separate department. It's called the Department of Water Management. So in 233, we resurfaced the street, and not long after that, the Water Management Department came in and cut this brand new street open and fixed a sewer repair. And one of our citizens called the city manager's office, and they said, whoa, y'all need to really work that out a lot better so that water management doesn't open up a street that you guys had just resurfaced. So this is illustrative of both of those conundrums. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to this area right here, and this shows the suboptimal data distribution. We had this block of Shoreham allocated to 233, and again, remember that was on the basis of the pavement condition rating, PCR. And so this was a bad street, and this was a bad street, and this was a bad street, and they were all worsely rated than this one and this one, so we subsequently then gave those to contract S234. But as we started implementing 234, then we looked at this a little bit differently and said, well, this doesn't make sense because citizens are asking questions. Why on S233 we're coming in and resurfacing this, and then we're skipping these streets and resurfacing this? So what we wanted to do was to kind of homogenize the street assignments by areas so that this was all with one contract or the other. The other thing that's falling out of this is that the streets that are green, whether they're in 233 or 234, were approved by the Department of Water Management as not needing any point repairs or videos, and the streets with question marks, the status was either unknown or they needed videos before they could tell. And the red streets were streets that actually they knew needed point repairs and they had to go open them up. So Water Management has, of the thousands of streets that we're resurfacing, in this picture most of them are green, but in reality and citywide most of them were either cyan or red, in that we couldn't go resurface them. So our resurfacing contractor said, well, we don't want to get started on this block and then have to pull back and come another time to do this block in the middle after Water Management finishes. So we needed a way to schedule Water Management's work at the same time we scheduled our own. And I'm just going to, Paul, I just want to check in to see if that description made sense, or if you think I need to spend any more time explaining that.
No, that's clear, and I think you're headed to how all this impacts what you're doing with Primavera and GIS. So
okay, cool.
I think you're looking good.
Good. So I'm going to click down here on my toolbar and just show you a couple of slides out of GIS. I can't replicate this process live because we just don't have enough time within our hour. But this is a slide from GIS that shows the picture that you just looked at, a little bit different area of town. But this is the resurfacing responsibilities for Barnhill. And Barnhill is ST233, and they're this kind of orange color. And Triangle is the other paving company, and they're the yellow color. So you're seeing the same kind of hopscotch pattern, where one contractor's doing this much and the other one's doing this much. The next slide shows how within GIS we can define an area of the city. In this case, it's kind of the central core north of I-85. And we can select all of the streets that are being resurfaced irrespective of which contract they're in. So this little green street select squiggly line indicates a street that's been selected, and there's green lines within the red ones as well. So we've got a selection set in GIS that is in this geospatial, this geographic area. And then you can right-click and dump out a table of the selected attributes of the objects that you have selected. And so you can see this table, we've got facility ID, beginning description, that's the beginning intersection, the ending intersection, the street name, the contract, so you can see it's a mix of 233 and 234, and the tonnage that we budgeted for each of those streets. And then another right click on the tonnage gives us these statistics. It shows us the frequency distribution of tonnages by facility ID, but more important was the total tonnage in the geographic area. So this particular selection set had 18,373 tons of surface course, which was our basis for doing the shuffling. And what we did is we broke the city into these geospatial areas, created selection sets, looked at the total tonnage in the area, and then assigned them to either one contractor or the other. And we did this in a meeting. It took about maybe an hour with both contractors present and our contracting team, and the ending result was this. We zoomed out a little bit, and Barnhill ST233 ended up with all of these purple streets, and Triangle ended up with all of the yellow streets. So then Triangle can move cleanly from one street to the next in their geographic area and not hopscotch around like our original plan had. Paul, so far so good?
Yes, looks great.
All right. Then just kind of to build on that and show how that worked within Primavera, we pulled out a data table from GIS, much like this one, by contract, and we put it into an Excel spreadsheet. And this is actually the spreadsheet I meant. This was the new contract assignment in column B for Triangle Paving and Grading. And this was in a geospatial area of town that we called Highgate because it was around the street system of Highgate was the collector. And these are the list of projects that were in that area that we assigned to them. I'm looking to see, and over here in the length column are the, instead of the length of the streets, you can see the residual ST233 street assignment. So this was a mix of the ones that have lengths came from 234, and the ones that have this contract number came from 233. The yellow row is one of those street segments that needed a video, and the red segments were two streets that needed point repairs. So the next thing that we did is we looked at a GIS map with a contractor, and we said, okay, in what order would you guys do these mobilizing to this area? So we sorted these in this first column, which is the order in which they're going to do them. So they said they would do the section of Highgate first, and then they would move on to St. James Court, and then back to Highgate, and so on. And this is where things get really cool, I think, because what we did over here is then we built durations for each of those activities based upon the metrics provided by the contractors. So they said they can mill 900 square yards a day, and they can do 18 adjustments per day, and they can pay 350 tons per day. And it turns out in the resurfacing business, this is the order of the activities. You have to mill before you can adjust, and you have to adjust before you can pave. So we computed the durations. We created new activity names to improve on our old ones that were the concatenation of the street name and the from and to intersections. That's really helpful inside P6. So you're looking at Highgate, you know what the limits are, instead of looking at a whole bunch of Highgates and not really understanding what the cross streets are. And then we automatically built activity IDs for videoing for our water management department. And what we're doing here is we're really building a work breakdown structure with these as the major work groups. So these are tasks or activities that water management's going to do. These are activity IDs for point repairs, and these are the activity IDs for milling adjustments and resurfacing. And we built those automatically. And then we leveraged the import feature of P6, and we figured out what the data structure looks like, needs to look like in a spreadsheet to import data into P6 for our new schedules. So these are the activity IDs from the previous tab, and those are for milling. So we just copied that vector over along with the addresses and the durations. We copy
Mike, I think we lost your voice again. Try replugging your headset in. Scott, you there?
Hey, this is Scott. I'm here. Mike's going to see if he can't get his mic working again.
Am I back in yet?
Yeah, you're back.
Oh, good. And computers are funny things, aren't they? Okay. So I was saying that what we did is we loaded the adjusting activity IDs, the resurfacing activity IDs, the video activity ID, and the point repairs. And then the next tab in an Excel spreadsheet that you're going to load into P6 is you define your relationships. So milling has a finish start relationship to adjustments, and we covered all those in this first set. And then milling has of one facility ID has a finish start relationship with the next facility ID in the order that we're going to be doing them. And then adjustments have a finish start relationship with a resurfacing activity ID for that same street segment. And down below, video, which is a water management activity in the work breakdown structure, has a finish start relationship prior to milling for the facility ID associated with it. So this looks like a lot of data, but it's not that much to build it just by copying and pasting values from one sheet, from this sheet, to the other sheet. So it really goes quite easy. And I thought what I would do now is go to P6 to show how that's imported. And you build a schedule that way. So I'm going to go back to my desktop and fire up P6. And while I do that, let me tell you that the database we're working on is called Virtual. It's on a virtual server. We've got two databases. This is our live data, and Virtual is a test bed.
Hey, Mike?
Yeah.
We had a question that just popped up about the process there.
Yeah.
And I guess your comment was we built the IDs automatically, and the question is, could you talk about how you did that? Could you clarify that?
Sure, that's great. Thank you for interrupting me. I'm going to go back to here and just show you how we built the activity IDs automatically, and it was done right here. And what we did is we said concatenate the facility ID in D3 with this token called -M for milling. And so there's just a concatenate formula for this activity ID. And the adjusting is the same way. It's just a concatenation of the facility ID with the suffix on it. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
And then to move the activity IDs for milling to the other two tabs necessary for Primavera, it's just right-click copy, and then we come over to the task over here, and this is the process by which you build it. We just highlight this, and then I'll do a paste special, and then just throw the values on there rather than the original formula. So what we did is we moved that data automatically over to the spreadsheet for Primavera. So far, so good?
Yeah, and then you're getting ready to show in Primavera where it came over.
Yeah. So I'm going to log in to the virtual server here. And it happens just that quick. So this is our Enterprise Project System, EPS. And in here, we've got our S233 contract. And the original project schedule is this P6 schedule right there. But when we broke out the areas by city, they're new schedules, and they're going to be suffixed with a -H for Highgate or the other areas. So I'm going to open up this project, and this is just a template that's got the WBS elements in it: milling, adjustments, resurfacing, video, point repairs. There are no activities in here yet. I'm going to do File, Import, and the import format I'm going to pick is Spreadsheet. I'll go to Next, select the file to import. I'm going to drill in the folder system to the folder that we're using for today's presentation. It's under Projects Miscellaneous, Primavera, Tobacco Road Presentation, Part 2. And there's the spreadsheet right there. I go Next, and it says, what do you want to import? Activities and relationships. Next. Import to, I have to click this and add the 234H project in P6 that I have open. And then I say Next, and I click Finish, and it's importing it while, or it's not giving us a status bar, but it's importing it. It tells us the import was successful, and I say OK. And I'm going to go take a look at the activities. And I need to find them, and they're in here someplace. So there they are in the month of April. And they haven't been scheduled yet, but I'll collapse the milling WBS, show the adjustments, I'll collapse that and show the resurfacing. And if I highlight that one resurfacing and go look at the relationships, it tells us that the predecessor is adjustments, and the activity ID is 61590, and that came from the spreadsheet. So as we all know with P6, the next thing we need to do is schedule it. And I'll tell you there's one bug that I think, Paul, is in the importer, and that is that even though this video is correctly shown in the Excel spreadsheet as being belonging to the WBS called video, it just for some reason gets thrown up here at the top. So I'm going to change that and just repoint it to the appropriate place so it goes down there and we have the video and the 2 point repairs made. And then to schedule it, I just press F9. I give it a start date. We'll use today, or the 25th of April for the heck of it. I'll say schedule, and so it builds the schedule automatically from the data that we extracted from GIS. And you can see that milling is the critical path everywhere. And then after milling, the adjustments can begin. And then after the adjustments are finished, the resurfacing can take over. And the last street to be done is the Abbey Place, which turns out it's also a point repair, and this is the finish start relationship for the water management activity that has to precede the milling associated with Abbey Place. And the most informative column then that we're sending to water management, and let me scroll back up to the top and right click and add columns that's not exposed right now, is the late finish date. And that's the key to getting our water management department to finish, and I'll just move that down and put it next to activity name right there, and I'll say OK. So if we scroll down back to the bottom, we can see that their late finish dates are in June, and that's when they have to have their work finished in order for our contract to be completed on time. Wow.
Okay, Mike, so what I think is really exciting about what you showed is you showed how Primavera and GIS were initially tied together, and then through lessons learned and contracts that were issued, you used GIS to reallocate work with your contractors, and you did that through GIS and then using, spreadsheets in Excel, you were able to take the reallocations and then send the changes back to Primavera to create new and improved schedules to show the contractors now where they needed to work and when they needed to work based on the reallocation of the work, which is a great example of how you use all the tools in your toolbox to manage your projects. So what I want to do is kind of maybe stop right here and then let the audience do questions. And if we have a little time left over in the end, if there's anything else we need to review from your side, Mike, or any other questions people want to take, we can do that. I do have one question from Eddie, I think is the name. I can't see the full name here on my screen, but says, where were the relationships defined before the import? And my understanding from the explanation is you sat down with the contractor and determined the sequencing of those activities with the contractor and put them into the spreadsheet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Paul, and that's a great question. The relationships were developed because in the business of street resurfacing, and I'm going to use the spreadsheet that I'm pointing to here, we know that we need to mill a street before we make an adjustment to the utility adjustments on that street and before we resurface that street. So there's a natural flow of finish start from left to right on each of those facility IDs. And then the other driving force comes from the order that we gave the streets over here in the first column. We said we're going to do this street before we do this street, and so on down the list. So what that does then, to scroll back here, I apologize for scrolling so much, but that leads to, so we have a finish start relationship from left to right, and then we have an also finish start relationship between one row to the next. So the milling on 61,590 has got to finish before the milling on 61,506 can begin. So you've got a finish start this way, a series of finish starts this way, and then you've got a finish start relationship between the video and the milling, and a finish start between point repairs and milling.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. So if you have questions, we still have everybody on mute. If you'll just type your question into the question box inside the meeting control center, then we will be sure to pose your questions to Mike and get his answers for you. So at this time, if you have questions, please ask those questions, and we'll queue them up as they come across and take that forward. Brett, did you have any other specifics you wanted to mention?
No, I did not, and I don't see any questions coming in.
Okay. All right. Do you want to take everybody off mute for one last round and see if there's any questions verbally before we end the session?
We'll give it a shot.
All right, I think Brett has removed everybody from mute, and if some of you would prefer to ask your questions instead of typing them, we'd be glad to take questions. All right, I think we got a bad connection with somebody there. All right, got another question here, Brett.
Okay, Paul, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
Okay. So, Mike, the question is, how often are you guys updating the schedule?
This kind of this is a great question. This kind of management on the resurfacing contracts has necessitated that the schedule is updated weekly. This these two projects, SC-233 and 234, have a really high visibility citywide right now in the media, with the citizens that are tired of potholes from the winter, and with the city council that wants it done sooner rather than later. And that was also partly the motivation, in addition to just that the geospatial distribution wasn't optimal. We also looked at it from the eye of, well, what can we do to improve the productivity and production? And so that led us down that path too. So I think that what we learned is that when we head down this path and we've got this kind of really high visibility critical project that we're managing between two contracts, our directions to our contractors now are to update these schedules weekly. And I think in part one, we talked about how we expose contract manager and P6 Web through the web portal of the city, and the contractors get into our computer system through that web portal, and they do all their own work. They input their own daily reports, and they update their P6 schedules themselves. They own them and update them. We just helped them with this mass rescheduling and handed it off to them, and they own them now. So they're coming in weekly, updating the P6 schedules. They come in daily, and they input daily reports daily.
And that's being reviewed by your inspectors, if I remember correctly.
That's exactly correct. Our inspectors look at the work that's reported in the contract manager daily report, sign off on it, and approve it. And there's a little bit of journaling behind the scenes. The contractors keeping copious notes about what they do, and our inspectors keep copious notes about what the contractor does, along with load tickets on asphalt and stone and payment items by the ton. And all those activities are journaled and then used to approve the daily report in Primavera.
Great. One more question. We have a question. Do you use P6 for earned value management or earned value calculations at this time?
I'd like to say that we did, but I would say we're not that smart yet, Paul. We don't really understand enough about earned value to know how to use it in this environment. And again, coming back to our deployment, we have a lot of areas we want to grow into, and that's clearly one of them, but as today we're not.
Okay. Any other questions out there that anybody would like to type in at this point? All right, so I'll kind of start wrapping things up. If I see any other questions come up, I'll let you know. Again, if anybody has specifics about how Primavera or integration with Primavera can occur in your organization, those of you in the Mid-Atlantic can contact Brett at our office up there in Columbia, Maryland. And then also down here in the Carolinas, feel free to contact myself or Mark Jones. Also, you have Tim Hart up in Columbia, Maryland that works with our clients. I don't see any other questions coming up, so we'll thank Mike and Scott for taking the time to present today. And this concludes, for the short term, how City of Durham is using Primavera, and they're going to continue to improve on that process and roll Primavera into other parts of their organization. And so maybe 6 months from now or a little bit further out, we'll have more news about the City of Durham. But we thank them greatly for both Part 1 and Part 2 of their presentation. And as you know from looking at our webinar schedule, our next webinar will be next week on Monday, and it will be the Coast Guard, United States Coast Guard, talking about Primavera P6, and they are moving towards earned value management. They have some goals, how they want to get there and how they want to do that. Like City of Durham, they're not quite there yet, but that is on the vision and the path of where they're headed. So thanks, everybody. Thank Mike and Scott, and we look forward to working with everybody again soon.
Paul, thanks for having us.
All right, thank you.